April 14, 1989. Mrs. Patricia Hendricks stood in the parking lot of Riverside High School in Magnolia, Louisiana, watching 23 excited teenagers pile onto a yellow school bus. The morning was warm, the sky clear, and her biology class was about to embark on what should have been a routine field trip to study the ecosystem of the nearby Atchafalaya Swamp. She checked her clipboard one more time, counted heads twice, and climbed aboard. The bus driver, a man named Earl Dawson who'd been driving for the district for 15 years, gave her a reassuring nod as he closed the door. At exactly 8:47 a.m., the bus pulled out of the parking lot. Parents waved from their cars. The school secretary made a note in her log. Everything appeared normal. Mrs. Hendricks had made this trip dozens of times over her 20-year teaching career. The swamp was only 45 minutes away, and they were scheduled to return by 3 p.m. The students, all sophomores ages 15 and 16, were armed with notebooks, cameras, and enthusiasm for getting out of the classroom. That was the last time anyone saw them. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me tell you what really happened to Mrs. Hendricks and her biology class. When the bus failed to return by 4 p.m., the school administration made their first call. Earl Dawson's wife said she hadn't heard from him, which was unusual. By 5:30 p.m., panic had set in. Parents descended on the school, demanding answers that no one had. The police were called. Search parties were organized. By nightfall, every law enforcement agency in 3 parishes was involved in what would become one of Louisiana's most perplexing disappearances. The route was straightforward. Highway 90 east toward Morgan City, then a well-maintained access road that led to the educational center on the edge of the Atchafalaya Basin. It was a path that school buses had traveled for years without incident. But when police drove the route that evening, they found nothing. No broken guardrails, no tire marks, no signs of an accident. The bus had simply vanished. Search helicopters took to the air at first light on April 15th. Boats combed the swamp's waterways. Volunteers walked the highways and access roads, looking for any clue. The Coast Guard was brought in to search the more remote areas of the basin. For 3 days, hundreds of people searched over 200 square miles of swampland, forest, and highway. They found nothing. Detective Marcus Thibodeau of the Louisiana State Police took charge of the investigation. At 48 years old, he'd worked missing persons cases for 2 decades, but nothing had prepared him for this. 23 teenagers, 1 teacher, and 1 bus driver had disappeared without a trace. No distress calls, no witnesses, no evidence. It was as if they had driven into thin air. The families were interviewed extensively. Every student's background was examined. Was there any possibility of a planned disappearance? Could the driver have taken them somewhere intentionally? The idea seemed absurd. Earl Dawson was a grandfather, a deacon at his church, with no criminal record and no financial troubles. Mrs. Hendricks was beloved by her students and colleagues. The teenagers were ordinary kids, with no reason to vanish. The bus itself became a focal point. Unit 47, a 1985 blue bird with distinctive rust spots on the left side and a small dent in the rear bumper where a student had backed into it with a bike. Someone had painted a small crawfish on the side panel, an inside joke from a previous field trip. The bus was distinctive enough that someone should have seen it, but no one had. The media descended on Magnolia within days. National news crews broadcast from the school parking lot. The story captured the nation's attention. An entire biology class vanished in broad daylight. Theories proliferated. Some suggested mass abduction. Others proposed the bus had somehow gone into the swamp and sunk without a trace. A few even suggested supernatural explanations, given the area's reputation for strange occurrences. The official search was called off after 2 weeks. There were no leads, no evidence, and no hope of finding anyone alive, even if they had survived an initial accident. The school held a memorial service without bodies. 23 empty chairs were arranged on the gymnasium floor, each one decorated with photos and personal items. Parents sobbed. Students who hadn't gone on the trip stood in shock, survivors guilt written across their faces. The case went cold almost immediately. Detective Thibodeau kept the file open on his desk, but with nothing new to investigate, there was little he could do. The families formed a support group, meeting monthly to share their grief and keep the memory of their children alive. Some hired private investigators. Others made pilgrimages to the swamp, searching on their own for answers that never came. Mrs. Hendricks's husband, David, never recovered. He died of a heart attack in 1992, and those close to him said he died of a broken heart. Earl Dawson's wife moved away to live with her daughter in Texas, unable to bear the whispers and speculation that her husband might have done something terrible. The town of Magnolia became synonymous with unsolved mystery, a place where something impossible had happened and nobody could explain it. Years passed. The story faded from national attention, becoming just another unsolved disappearance in the annals of true crime. Occasionally, a documentary would revisit the case, interviewing aging parents and reviewing the same evidence that had yielded no answers in 1989. New theories were proposed and debunked. Some claimed the bus had been taken by drug runners. Others suggested government conspiracy. None of it brought the families any closer to the truth. Then, in October 2023, 34 years after the disappearance, a surveyor named Thomas Reed was conducting a routine land assessment deep in the Atchafalaya Basin. His company had been hired to map a section of swampland that a developer wanted to purchase for ecotourism. Reed was using drone technology to create topographical maps, flying his equipment over areas that hadn't been properly surveyed in decades. When he reviewed the footage that evening, something caught his eye. In the canopy of an ancient cypress tree, approximately 8 miles from the nearest road, was something that shouldn't be there. Something large, yellow, and geometric. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, or perhaps an unusual formation of moss. But when he enhanced the image, his blood ran cold. It was a school bus, wedged in the branches of a massive tree, 50 feet above the swamp water. Reed stared at his screen for a long time, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. There was no logical explanation for how a full-size school bus could end up in a tree. The angle was wrong, the height impossible. But there it was, unmistakable even after decades of exposure to the elements. He called the police immediately. Within hours, Louisiana State Police had mobilized a response team. By morning, boats were navigating through the dense swamp toward the coordinates Reed had provided. The area was remote, accessible only by water, and thick with vegetation that made progress slow. But as the search team rounded a bend in the waterway, they saw it. Unit 47 was lodged in the massive branches of a cypress tree that had stood for over 300 years. The bus was tilted at a 45-degree angle, its front end pointing toward the sky, rear wheels dangling over empty air. Rust covered every surface, and moss hung from the chassis like funeral shrouds. But the yellow paint was still visible, and so was the small crawfish painted on the side panel. The scene was impossible, physically impossible. There was no road anywhere near this location. No way a bus could have driven here, and certainly no explanation for how it had ended up suspended in a tree. The branches supporting it were massive, grown around the vehicle as if the tree had slowly consumed it over decades. But that would mean the bus had been there since it disappeared in 1989. Detective Sarah Morrison, who had taken over the cold case from the retired Thibodeau, stood in the boat, staring up at the wreckage. She was 34 years old, the same age as the mystery itself. She had grown up hearing about the missing biology class, never imagining she would be the one to find them. A specialized recovery team was brought in. Tree climbers, engineers, and forensic experts worked together to devise a plan for accessing the bus without destroying evidence or causing it to fall. The operation took 3 days. Platforms were built in the tree. Safety lines were secured. Every step was documented with cameras and detailed notes. When they finally managed to open the rear emergency door, the smell that emerged was overwhelming. Decay, mildew, and something else. Something that suggested death. The interior was a nightmare of rust and rot. Seats had collapsed. The floor had rusted through in places. Moss and vegetation had invaded through broken windows. But there were no bodies. The bus was empty. Completely empty. No skeletal remains. No personal belongings. Nothing to indicate that 25 people had ever been inside. Forensic teams spent 2 weeks examining every inch of the vehicle. They found rust, water damage, and evidence of decades of exposure to the elements. But they found no human DNA, no blood, no tissue, nothing. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had the bus gotten into the tree? Where were the people who had been inside it? And most disturbing of all, what did it mean that the vehicle was empty? Detective Morrison reviewed every case file, every interview, every piece of evidence from 1989. She spoke with the now elderly parents who had never stopped hoping for answers. She consulted with engineers and physicists about the impossibility of what they had found. And slowly, a theory began to form. The swamp where the bus was discovered was known to locals as a place where strange things happened. Compasses malfunctioned. Animals behaved oddly. There were stories passed down through generations about people who had entered that section of the basin and never returned, or returned changed, unable to explain where they had been. Morrison discovered something in the original case, files that had been overlooked. On the morning of April 14, 1989, there had been unusual seismic activity reported throughout southern Louisiana. Nothing major, just minor tremors that most people hadn't even noticed. But the epicenter had been directly beneath the Atchafalaya Basin. She also found reports of strange electromagnetic readings in the area around the time of the disappearance. Amateur radio operators had reported interference. Pilots flying over the region had experienced instrument malfunctions. All of this had been dismissed at the time as unrelated to the missing bus. But what if it wasn't? Morrison consulted with geologists and discovered something extraordinary. The Atchafalaya Basin sat atop a complex network of underground caves and channels, some of which had never been fully mapped. These geological formations could, under the right conditions, create unusual phenomena: sinkholes, sudden flooding, even localized atmospheric effects that might explain compass malfunctions and electromagnetic interference. The theory she developed was both simple and terrifying. What if the bus had encountered some kind of localized geological event, something that had literally pulled the vehicle and its occupants into an underground cavity? The tree where it was found stood over one of the deepest and most complex cave systems in the region. But that still didn't explain how the bus had ended up in the tree branches, or where the people had gone. The case remains officially unsolved. The bus has been removed from the tree and is currently in a secure facility where forensic examination continues. Detective Morrison still works the investigation, following leads that seem to lead nowhere, chasing answers that remain just out of reach. The families finally have something tangible, a piece of the puzzle, even if it's a piece that doesn't fit anywhere. Some find comfort in knowing that the bus has been found, that their loved one's final vehicle has been recovered. Others find the empty bus more disturbing than no discovery at all. What happened to Mrs. Patricia Hendricks and her biology class remains one of Louisiana's greatest mysteries. The bus that was supposed to bring them home was found hanging in a tree, empty and impossible, raising questions that may never be answered. 23 students, 1 teacher, and 1 bus driver vanished 34 years ago. The swamp gave back their bus, but kept everything else. And somewhere in the depths of the Atchafalaya Basin, the truth waits.